IndieSider. My name is Ken Gagney, and this week I am playing the indie game Dyscourse, followed by an interview with the developer. Dyscourse came out on March 25th for Steam, and it is an interactive choose-your-own-adventure game from Boston-based Owlchemy Labs. Let me start by choosing play. This is entirely a keyboard-driven game, and you'll see what I mean by choose your own adventure. I'm going to start a whole new game. I have played this through thoroughly once before, and you can even actually play this game with just a single hand. It's that easy to navigate. So this game starts very much in the style of the TV show Lost. You are a barista named Rita the barista, and your plane has crashed, and you wake up not knowing what happened. You know who you are and where you came from, but you are alone. Stay calm, Rita, stay calm. So right here, I am controlling Rita. I can walk around, and when I get near something worth investigating, I push spacebar, and it tells me a little bit something about the item I have found. Now here's a frying pan. I'm gonna want that. They're closing in on us, huh? Now see, that's the trigger for the next action sequence. When I pick up the frying pan, this is what happens. Otherwise, I'm just gonna be stuck in this little scene for a while. Good old 21C. So here I go, and I can choose not yet. I can walk around some more, or I can go on to the next scene. The game never rushes you somewhere that you're not ready to go. And now, what's this? Somebody named Teddy and somebody named Not Known is being surrounded by crabs. This could be Christmas Island. Chips in their brains. What is going on? Okay. She's probably here to feast on us, just like these crabs. What? Are you talking about me? You're totally clueless, aren't you, Teddy? That's Steve. Hi, Steve. So now, I have to choose what do I do. Well, this is kind of a tense situation, so I'm just going to rush right in. Not keep him waiting. Oh, okay. So here's the first choice I need to make. Do I help Steve, or do I help Teddy? Viewers, help me choose. Well, this is in Twitch, so I'm just going to go ahead and help Teddy. Attack crabs with frying pan. Scare crabs by swinging frying pan. Go help Steve instead. I'm going to attack. Attack! Bang! Uh-oh, now I'm... Oh, no! Now they're all... Even though I'm the one who attacked, they went after him. Well, it got them to stop attacking me. They have a sample of his DNA. Ugh, my legs are all torn up. Let's meet back at camp. The others will want to meet. There are others? Didn't get your name. It's Rita the barista. There are other survivors? Yeah, they're farther inland. Proper use of farther as opposed to further. Well done. I'm Steve, by the way. My name is Teddy. Let's get going. And now I can walk around some more and examine stuff if I want. I'm glad I can't remember the crash. It must have been terrible. And not much else to look at around here. You'll notice a little thought bubble above Steve. That's my trigger for leaving this room. Ready to head out? Let's go, or give me a minute? Yeah, let's go. Let's get going. Yes, that's it. I'm Krabs in a human suit. Only child, weren't you, Teddy? No, my brother was human, not Krabs. Let's go, Rita. So throughout the game, I am presented with these different decisions. Do I stay or do I go? Do I help person A or person B? And there is really not much action or skill involved. There are those free-ranging moments where I can explore the surrounding and figure out what I can use. But mostly it's just dialogue and then making a selection. Must have been out for hours. Are you alright? I think so. What do you think? That's kind of sarcastic. I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to say I don't know. "21C. That's awful. Still Rita. Hello, Jolene. So, a millionaire and his wife? A millionaire and her husband? Nebulord 90. That handheld game machine is not going to last long if you're running on batteries, unless you have some sort of a solar-powered thing. So we got Jolene and George, Garrett, Teddy, and Steve, and Rita. And that's it. Just the 6 of us. There's a mountain off in the distance, okay, so that's one thing we might want to explore later. Got a fire built, starting on some shelter. A previous IndieSider game. A bag of pretzels. Oh no! No! Not my pretzels! Cheese Louise and sweet cream cheese. Those pretzels are our only food. Well, such a well-balanced meal that would have been. Pig monsters. Also known as boars. Rita, you and come with George and me. Let's go get this boar. I don't think that's the best idea. It's not like we have weapons to hunt them. My Georgie... So, Teddy has a metal detector. I have a frying pan. Georgie has an old fishing pole. And Jolene has a camera. And Steve, you have a cigarette. We just stay here and defend the resources. So now, I need to make a decision. Do I protect the food? Do I go after the boar? I'm gonna say let's go after the boar, because we need food. And even though I'm a vegetarian, this is not real meat. This is digital meat. So I can get behind that. Yeah. It's not about getting the pretzels back, it's about getting boar meat. Bacon, as you said. What are we supposed to do if something attacks us here? You're all brave as a bar of soap. Hide. There's nothing here worth dying over, so just hide. Like one of them emus. I don't think that's emus that do that. Okay. Now, I've never taken this path of the game. Last time I stayed behind and defended the camp, so I don't know what's going to happen next. Which is pretty exciting. You don't get to do everything in the game. This isn't like Final Fantasy VI, where you choose one party and then the other party. You get to explore both branches eventually. This game, you make a decision and you live with it or die with it. Although Rita herself cannot die, actually. There will be an end to the game. Either you get off the island or you don't, and it determines how many of you got off the island. I've gotten off with Teddy and Steve, and that's it. I think Jolene came once. No, Jolene and Steve came another time. So I've only had a 50% survival rate at best. Tell Jolene to flash her camera, tell George to throw his pole, throw frying pan. Throw your pole. No, actually, flash the camera. I don't think it's gonna stun it. Oh, you're probably right. To throw the pole. Just do it, George. There it comes. Okay, this is an action, throw frying pan. Oh, I missed! That was stupid. Should have had her flash the camera. So now we have no meat and no pretzels, and that's it. So this is how the game is played. There are more tense sequences, people will die. Not a trace. Dang it. Later on, you'll get to choose whether or not to go explore the mountain, or some man-made structure off in the distance, or go out to sea and try to find a boat, or set up an SOS. And you can't do all these things. When you beat the game, when you're done, your particular playthrough, you get the option to rewind to any particular day and re-choose the decisions from that day, so you don't need to start from scratch every single time. But it's still very fascinating how many different options there are in this game. So I'm going to be speaking with one of the developers. I want to give my thanks to Jenna Hofstein for introducing me to this game, Michael Carrier for introducing me to the person I'm about to interview, and to Gaming Media for one of the questions I'm about to ask. My apologies that both the developer and I were sick at the time of the interview, which you may be able to hear, and also I think I may have had my Skype audio settings slightly off, because even despite the sickness, my audio wasn't quite right. But I hope you enjoyed this interview, and you can always find the audio edition on iTunes if you just want to hear the interview without any of the gameplay. So, thanks for watching, and here's the rest of this week's IndieSider. Today I'm chatting with Graeme Borland, developer at Owlchemy, who was brought onto the team specifically to work on Dyscourse, finally culminating after 2 years in a recent and successful product launch. Hello, sir.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Fine, thank you. It must be so exciting to see your baby launched out into the world.
Yeah, it was a very long road to get here, and the game went through a lot of changes during the 2 years, and it's super awesome to see something actually out and on Steam after such a long journey.
What would you say were some of the biggest changes you saw the game undergo in those 2 years? Does it pretty much match the original vision, or were there some major evolutions along the way?
We basically, in the earlier days, we pretty much did a 180 on Dyscourse's design, actually, because the original inception of the idea was sort of as a survival game, which people tend to think of as more of a mechanically driven, like stats and items and crafting type of mechanical game as opposed to a narrative game. And that's kind of what we were originally going for, but throughout the course of doing our Kickstarter in 2013 and getting some more feedback from players and stuff, the parts of the game that people liked ended up being the narrative parts and the character moments with the NPCs, and that ended up being the stuff we focused on to the point where it literally just became a narrative game. And once we embraced that and sort of intentionally started trying to make a narrative game, that's when we sort of found what Dyscourse was sort of meant to be.
So it sounds like the original vision was a little bit closer to the rest of Owlchemy's portfolio, games like Jack Lumber and which are very action-oriented. Was it challenging to depart from that style that you've so successfully developed your company?
Yeah, I mean, Owlchemy's certainly never done like a narrative-heavy game before, and never anything on this scale. Like this was a huge production compared to past titles, so it was different. Yeah, I mean, Owlchemy doesn't really do anything consistently in that the types of games aren't a set thing. Like if we just think something is cool and worth doing, we'll do it. Yeah, so it's different, but we don't really have so much of a grand scheme of what we're trying to make. We just like making little interesting projects, so we thought it would be cool to do some narrative stuff.
For someone who has not been actively involved in game development, like me, from the outside looking in, it might seem like the kind of game you ultimately went with might have been easier or simpler to design than a more action-oriented or resource management game, because you don't have to think about inventory or character stats or stuff like that. Is that in fact true? Was a narrative game easier to produce?
I wouldn't say easier, and it's funny because we thought that in the beginning. Like our original idea had to rely on a lot of AI and stuff for the characters because it was very like open world, sandboxy, mechanic driven. And we thought, yeah, it'll be easier if we just write everything ourselves and we don't have to worry about making the game smart enough to figure things out. But the amount of work involved in writing out all the branches and making sure things actually work properly was, I mean, it's certainly equivalent, if not more complicated in some ways, to actually make a compelling narrative game that branches in the way that Dyscourse does.
So what sort of original tools or assets had to be developed at Owlchemy to produce this game? I assume it's not just written in Twine, for example.
No, that wouldn't exactly cut it. Yeah, we're a Unity studio, so we do everything in Unity, and one of the major things we had to do for this game was to develop a custom editor extension for Unity for just managing our content. And a big challenge of figuring out how to make the game was actually just figuring out how we would structure our content. Like, you can think, sure, a story is person A says something, person B says something, but what is a story? How is the content of a story actually structured and stored in a game like Dyscourse? So that was a big exploration of like what kind of flowcharts and stuff like that can we use to actually describe the content in our game. So we ended up making this huge editor that's basically like this crazy flowcharting system, kind of like a finite state machine, but not finite. It's just got all kinds of lines and arrows flying all over the place. So we have a flowchart system for the game's content, and then a separate flowchart system for the game's dialogue. We use a program called ChatMapper for that, so our writer would just write out a branching flowchart of person A talking to person B dialogue. And that sort of interfaces with this custom tool we've made, which is a separate flowchart of content branching. So it's basically a giant chaotic mess of flowcharts.
Now I see ChatMapper can be found at chatmapper.com. As for the custom Unity editor that Owlchemy developed, how does that work? Does Unity require that you then release that tool to the public, or is it proprietary to Owlchemy?
It's proprietary to us. Yeah, like it's not, we could like theoretically we could put it on the asset store or something, but it's not really something that would be useful to other games. Like, it's definitely tailor-made for Dyscourse and the specific type of content we make, so yeah.
That means it must also be rather limited not only to the general public, but also to Owlchemy. I mean, when else would you use that tool except to create Dyscourse 2?
Yeah, exactly. And we've kind of structured Dyscourse in a way that we can add additional stories to it. Like, we have the Dyscourse core game, which is the story of Rita. And as part of our Kickstarter, one of the goals was that we'd make this sort of secondary short story about a bunch of indie developers who've crash landed on an island, and it's sort of like a short story about them surviving as like this alternate, basically like an alternate scenario for the game. So it uses the same system and the same type of content, obviously, but yeah, like that's basically the limitation of what we can do with the system, is to make more Dyscourse.
And that DLC is actually happening? You met that stretch goal?
Yeah, we're working on it right now, actually, and it's just going to be a free part of the game. Like, it's just more stuff you can do with Dyscourse. So anyone who has it on Steam will just get it when it comes out.
Will those indie developers be fictional, or will they be based on somebody you might know?
They're actually like literal representations of actual developers. We've got a few people like Tim Schafer, Edmund McMillan, Phil Tibetowski, Alexander Bruce is in it. There's several people who are actually literally real people.
And do they know that they're going to be in this game?
Yeah, everybody's signed off on being represented.
Oh, good. What about the characters that are in the core Dyscourse game? How did you decide on those particular characters or archetypes? I know you are the developer for the game, and you may have done some animation as well, maybe not so much had a hand in the narrative, but any insight you can shed into how you chose these particular characters?
The thing we wanted to do with the archetypes of the characters was basically the only real goal we had was just to A, make them interesting, and B, to sort of stay away from the existing tropes in the survival narrative type of thing. Like, we didn't want to have, you know, the tough guy and the survivalist person who actually knows what they're doing, and like these kind of like you would see in like a zombie game or something where you have the very distinct like character classes pretty much. So we took the angle of like, who are the random people you would be stuck with on an airplane if you're traveling or something, and how would they act if they were thrown into a survival situation they had no idea how to deal with. So we tried to think of archetypes that would make for interesting conflicts and situations based on that, and that was pretty much our only guideline. So we had a lot of ideas that were thrown out or revised, and we cut it down to the 6 that we have.
So unlike the DLC, these core 6 characters are not based on any real individuals?
No, like they're basically based on very general character tropes. Like, we've got a conspiracy theory person, a gamer type person, a farmer, that kind of stereotype.
Because Steve actually reminded me of somebody from the comic book Knights of the Dinner Table. And that comic book itself they heavily employ a lot of different archetypes as well, but it was just interesting to imagine that this could be the same person in both universes.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of our characters do totally have like references and stuff based on their theme. There's a lot of different science fiction and stuff references in there.
Speaking of science fiction, this game is about crash survivors stranded on a desert island with a government conspiracy being suspected. How much of this game is inspired by or is a parody of Lost?
Yeah, that's something that does get brought up a lot. It's funny for me personally because I've never seen any of Lost, so coming from my side, I can't really say that it's influenced me, but the others have seen it, and I think it's influenced in general by stories like that. Like any island survival scenario, you're kind of inevitably gonna get like subconscious inspiration, I guess. And yeah, like I say, there's plenty of references to not just stuff that relates to the survival scenario, but stuff that relates to the tropes of the characters, and referencing like for Teddy, the conspiracy theorist guy, referencing alien movies and X-Files type stuff, and different references from different series.
That's interesting. I thought I was the only one who'd never seen Lost. Based on what I know about Lost, I would say Dyscourse is probably closer to that than, say, Gilligan's Island. Although, now that I think about it, there's probably a slight element of that as well, with Rita running around with her frying pan just whacking things.
Yeah.
So this game is all about choice. Rita gets to decide which characters go where, what their goals are, who's in charge. And that seems to be a common theme with a lot of very popular games and franchises nowadays, whether it's The Walking Dead, Life is Strange, or even Mass Effect. Narrative choice is an up-and-coming, if not already here, gameplay mechanic. To what do you attribute this? Why is that so popular nowadays?
I think that just to choose is like a really good fundamental sort of verb that you can use in game design that can be implemented in like so many different ways. Like in an action game or something where your main verb is like just to kill or to attack or something, that's something people can easily understand and be like, yeah, I have to kill the bad guy, stuff like that. To choose is almost like this even more fundamental thing of like every human being understands what it is to pick A or B, and it's like this super basic thing, but you can use it in so many different ways and people will just instantly get it, which I think is a lot of it. Like if you're just, whether you're playing it or watching a Let's Play or whatever, like you know what's going on, you know how the cause and effect is going to work, because that's just what happens when you make a choice. Like it's such a supremely basic thing that it can be used in such diverse ways. I think it's just inherently interesting.
That's true. For example, the movie Sophie's Choice, that film would not have been as riveting if you put any other verb in there, but just having to choose between these limited options the game presents you can be really challenging, especially when the clock is ticking.
Yeah, definitely.
I originally bought Dyscourse actually not even knowing what kind of game it was. I just wanted to support a local Boston developer. And so when I started playing and it asked me to attack the crabs, I'm like, oh, this is the action sequence. This is where I get to wail on them. And that actually didn't happen. There really isn't much action. It's mostly dialogue, mostly tree-based, and a few sequences where you get to freely roam around within a confined area, but even that may not necessarily impact what happens next. So there is a lot of choice, but is there a lot of skill?
Yeah, that's one thing we're definitely conscious of, is trying to keep the game very accessible, because it's like it's really just a story. So that's something we don't really think you should need to have really good reflexes in order to experience the quote-unquote correct path or anything like that. So yeah, keeping things like it's directional controls and one button, like it's pretty simple to understand and play, and you can't really, there's no game over screen, you can't fail either. So yeah, accessibility was a thing we were definitely thinking about. And yeah, like you can frame, kind of like what I was saying before, you can frame choice not just in the choosing what your character is going to say, but the parts of the game where you can roam around, choice comes into play of like whether you're finding objects or not and what you're doing with those objects, kind of all ties into the same system.
So I've played through the game once, and then using the time rewind feature, which is great by the way, I went back and replayed specific days and certain events, but I haven't yet started the whole game from scratch again, which I'm looking forward to doing, because I want to make some completely different choices from the get-go. How many different endings are there to this game? Like if I wanted to do a complete playthrough, if I was a perfectionist, a completionist, how many times would I have to play this game?
That's a very interesting question, and one that we've discussed internally basically throughout the entire development of Dyscourse. And I think the most honest answer to how many endings there are is I don't know, and I don't think any of us actually know, because every single choice you make does actually branch the game in either a small way or a large way. And people will count, like, there are some moments in the game where it's more clear that you're making a choice between path A and path B, and people will think like, oh, that means there's two paths through the game. But really, each one of those things you choose, you could have any permutation of the 6 people, alive or dead, injured or not injured, with all the different injuries and stuff like that. They could like you or not like you, and all these factors go into what happens when you go down that path. So there's so many like micro branches and just details that change. I mean, you have to draw the line of like what constitutes one ending being different from another. Like is it a different ending if you get off the island with Garrett and he hates you versus he likes you? Because in each one of those cases, you're seeing unique dialogue and different events will happen and stuff. So really, it's a completely different ending. But it's impossible to count those because there's just so many. I think we have, in terms of numbers, we've got 365 variables that we use internally to store like choices that have made a meaningful difference. So whatever that is multiplied out by like how many times you can, how many different combinations and stuff, it's definitely an absurd number.
If you don't even know how many endings there are, how can you QA them all? I mean, how many times did your quality assurance players have to go through this game to make sure, yep, everything worked, that choice led to this branch, this dialogue makes sense based on what I did earlier, it all works out?
Yeah, that was definitely a very interesting challenge, and it kind of it fed into how we designed our tools. We designed our tools sort of to make that process easier, because we obviously saw from the beginning that was going to be a huge challenge. So what we kind of ended up doing is parts of the game are compartmentalized into, like you'll have a scene of like, we're going for water today, and the water situation is like a chunk. And then we say what bits of information from earlier in the game are relevant to this chunk, and we sort of use those as inputs, which will branch the water event. And then there might be, 10 different ways that can play out based on certain previous things that may have happened. And then when that's over, we send some information to the outputs of that water situation, which can then be used for future situations. So we can jump into the game at any point, and as long as we provide it the information that's relevant to any specific moment in time, we can test that specific moment in time from any in point. It's not a perfect way to test things because it requires a lot of knowledge from the tester about how the game works. But that's what we've been doing, and I mean, we've been doing most of our testing just ourselves. We don't have like a QA team. It's just really us doing the testing as we build things. So that's worked out for us, but it's definitely an extremely complicated process to test.
As you developed this game, you probably saw other narrative-based games coming out. As I mentioned earlier, Life is Strange. Was there anything that you learned from seeing how those games were working as they were being released, and you said, oh, that's a good idea, or oh, it's interesting to see how they're tackling this problem that we're addressing. We want to learn from that or differentiate ourselves from that, the way they're doing it?
Yeah, I don't think we did much of that explicitly. Like, we all kind of, have games that we play and notice different things about different design decisions. But I think we had, once we sort of settled on our narrative focus, we sort of had a pretty clear vision of like what we wanted Dyscourse to be. I don't think anything else really does it the way we do in terms of just, it's almost making, as opposed to making a story game, it's like we've created this like dense, chaotic ball of multiple stories, and the game is like going through that ball and picking out different stories and different threads and stuff like that. So it's a bit weird even to compare it to like Walking Dead type games where it's a straight up story, because it really is meant to be played more than once and sort of explored in a different way than most narrative games.
I found this game most similar to Microzine, which is a monthly game on disc that I used to get back when I was in grade school. It was aimed at educational environments, and they would have these sort of a choose-your-own-adventure type of game called Twist-A-Plot, where it was basically a text-driven game, but illustrated with various graphics on the Apple II screen. And that's kind of what Dyscourse felt like to me. It was a choose-your-own-adventure game with graphics. And I loved that. I felt like it was Microzine grown up, and I felt like a little kid again playing it, especially as you mentioned. It's so accessible. You don't need to have fast reaction times. It's just something anybody can play.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you got that.
Now, you were talking about the vision for the game and how that was influenced in part by your fans. As far as I know, this was the first time Owlchemy has relied on crowdfunding to create a game. At least I don't see any other Kickstarters associated with that account. So what sort of lessons or surprises did you encounter along that path?
Yeah, this was our first use of Kickstarter, so that was definitely a new experience and set of challenges. We did the Kickstarter in November of 2013, so the game had not actually formed into its final narrative-based direction that we have now, and it was really interesting to see, like, we still had elements in the game at that time of, like, twitch-based combat, like you would actually have to hunt an animal with reflexes and stuff like that. So it was a concern after we did the Kickstarter of like, yeah, people backed this survival game. Are they going to be upset if we, change the direction into this more story-focused thing? And I guess we lucked out by having awesome backers and fans who were just totally supportive of it, because people ended up digging the direction, and it kind of just worked out. But yeah, it's weird to have such a concrete idea in people's heads of like, oh yeah, this is the game I backed, this is the game I want, and then having to change that because we know we can make it better. That was a weird decision to have to make, but it definitely worked out for the best, I think.
And there were not many people who were upset or who were demanding refunds or anything?
No, actually. It was pretty well received considering how drastic of a change we ended up making to the design.
Huh, impressive. If I'm reading Kickstarter correctly, it looks like the game was originally slated for September 2014. Were there some bumps along the way that pushed it back to February of 2015?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we were still in the process of changing our direction a bit at the time, so taking estimates as to how long it would take to generate content and stuff was still difficult at that time. And we got a lot of good feedback from PAX East that year in 2014, which did a lot to help shape the game and stuff. So after PAX, we sort of had this sit-down discussion of like, how are we gonna change the game, and what are we actually gonna do now that we've got all this feedback. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have to push the date back because you need more time. That's just how it is. But yeah, once we figured out what we were actually going to do, then we were able to make a better estimate.
I'm sorry, I said February 2015. The game came out March 25th, which means at the time of this interview, the game has been out only about 2 weeks. So far on Steam, the reviews are listed as very positive. The only criticism I've found of the game is that it might be too short. How would you say the community's responded to this game? Has it been fairly positive?
Yeah, the reaction's been incredibly good from what I was expecting, because yeah, it's definitely more of a niche title, because you would expect only people who are into like choose your own adventure books and stuff like that to be really interested and know what they're getting into. But yeah, the positive reaction's been fantastic. And yeah, like the people who complain about it being too short, I think are not understanding what they're getting really, because it's difficult to explain to people what Dyscourse is, and it's not so much a story as like a repeatable world that you can go into and pull stories out of. So yeah, if you play it once, it's only going to be, you know, an hour long, but that's really not what the game is.
Now, for people who have a YouTube channel like I do, did you take into consideration that this might be a difficult game to Let's Play?
We actually thought that Let's Plays would be a pretty useful tool for demonstrating the scope of the differences you can get by making different choices. And I don't think any of us expected Let's Players to pick it up as much as it has been. It's been great. And yeah, it's awesome, especially people who will play through the game with like with a co-host or something, and be talking back and forth about like, oh, I did that in my playthrough, and you're doing this, and it's completely different. I haven't even seen this content before, and people who play through it talking like that is really helpful to sort of demonstrate and explain the scope of the game, so that's been really helpful.
For someone who may be the sort of completionist I was referring to earlier, I can see how they might be tempted to do a Let's Play that actually has YouTube pop-ups along each of the choices, unless the viewers on YouTube actually click a box in the YouTube video and branch out to another video so they can actually play the game technically through YouTube. Although, if there are really 300 plus variables, that would be a lot of videos.
That would be a very, very big channel. Even just to do the dialogue choices would be a ridiculous undertaking, but there are also parts in the game where you know, you have to move and react to stuff and explore and stuff like that, which probably wouldn't really work with that method. But yeah, you'd be looking at, you know, thousands of videos to do something like that.
Cool. So one last question. As I mentioned, this was Owlchemy's first time on Kickstarter, and this is a very different kind of game from what you've done before. So for people who are looking for some sort of lineage or heritage of games that they can put their money behind, they can say, okay, this is a company that does racing sims really well, or this is a company that does sports games really well. I know that they've a proven track record in that genre, so I'm going to back this game because I know what I'm going to get. But as you mentioned, what connects all the Owlchemy games together is just that you do what you think is cool. And that is cool, but it doesn't necessarily establish a consistency that some less eager investors may be looking for. So what was the pitch for Dyscourse? How do you say, hey, we've never done a game like this, here's why you should give us your money?
I mean, I think the thing that connects a lot of Owlchemy games is kind of the lightheartedness and sense of humor that we tend to approach things with. That's pretty consistent across titles. And I think it's kind of like, we make games that you might think are like weird or strange, or it's like, why would that be, why are you making that? And then the answer is just like, well, we thought it would be cool to make. Trust us, you'll like it. And then you do like it. And that's like, Yeah, it's kind of placing some trust on us, but the thread we try to weave through everything is just that, yeah, this thing is weird and different, but you'll have fun because we put a lot of love and effort into it, and we think you'll like it. It's kind of a trust thing, I suppose.
I think that's a very accurate motto for Dyscourse. It's weird and different, and you'll have fun. I mean, it certainly worked for me, so thank you so much for giving us your time to talk about Dyscourse. It's been a great game, and I hope it continues to go well for the company. I'm looking forward to getting some more endings, and I'll be keeping my eye out for that indie dev DLC. That sounds fantastic. Any ETA for that?
Nothing concrete yet for that, but yeah, soon enough.
Can we say calendar year 2015?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Your lower logger